I never thought I'd hear my own daughter tell me to stay away from her children. The words hit me before I could even understand them. One moment I was standing on her porch with a small bag of toys I'd picked out for the kids. And the next she was staring at me with a coldness I'd never seen in her eyes. "Dad, you need to stop interfering. Don't show up uninvited anymore." That was the first thing she said. No hello, no smile, no warmth. Just that, sharp, final. For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking, or maybe stressed, or maybe misunderstood something I had done. But the way she kept her arms crossed, the way she positioned herself halfway out the door as if she didn't want her children to see me, it told me this wasn't sudden anger. This was something she had practiced saying. I remember hearing the kids inside, laughing about something on the TV, their voices bright and innocent. They had no idea I was standing right there, being told I wasn't welcome in their lives anymore. They didn't know their grandfather was close enough to touch the doorknob, yet already being pushed out of the family. I asked her quietly, "What did I do wrong?" She didn't answer at first. She just sighed like she was tired of me. "It's better this way. You're crossing boundaries. Please don't come around unless I say so." Boundaries. That word never belonged between us. I raised her alone after her mother passed. I held her through every fever, every heartbreak, every fear. I was the one who taught her to ride a bike, the one who saved for her school trips, the one who stayed up late helping her finish applications. And now she spoke to me like I was a stranger who needed instructions. Her tone wasn't just cold. It felt rehearsed, as if someone else had told her exactly how to phrase it. The resentment in her voice didn't match our history. It didn't sound like her. It sounded like something planted, something encouraged. And the way she glanced over her shoulder into the house, quick, nervous, like she needed approval, made my stomach twist. I tried to step forward, not to force my way in, but just to see the children. She blocked the doorway with her body. "They don't need confusion," she said. "They don't need you showing up without notice." Confusion. That word sat heavy in my chest. What had she been telling them? What version of me was she shaping in their minds? When she finally shut the door, it wasn't slammed. It was slow, quiet, firm, the kind of closing meant to send a message. This isn't your place anymore. I stood there for a long time, holding that small bag of toys in my hand, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't understand how a relationship built on love could turn into a barrier this high. And as I walked back to my car, one question followed me like a shadow. What would you do if your own child tried to shut you out of your grandchildren's lives? The last time my grandchildren knew my name, they said it with so much excitement that it echoed in my chest for days. I can still hear it clearly. They ran toward me in the front yard, arms open, calling, "Grandpa," like I was the best part of their week. Moments like that used to come often, little bursts of love that made aging feel less heavy. But looking back, that day feels like the final moment of sunlight before a long storm. I didn't realize anything was changing at first. It started small, tiny details I brushed off because I didn't want to believe they meant anything. My daughter began arriving late to our visits, her smile tighter, her attention scattered. She seemed distracted, irritated at nothing I could see. When I asked if everything was all right, she said she was just tired. But the answer didn't fit her tone. Then she met someone new. She didn't tell me much about him. The few times she mentioned him, her words sounded guarded, as if she were choosing them carefully. After he entered the picture, My invitations to spend time with the kids were met with longer pauses, slower replies, and excuses that didn't add up. Maybe next weekend, Dad. We're busy. The kids have things going on. They're too tired today. At first, I believed her. Parents get overwhelmed, schedules get complicated. But weekends started stacking up like bricks forming a wall. And each time I reached out, it felt like she was placing another one on top. One afternoon, I called to see if I could drop by with some snacks the kids loved. She hesitated, then said, "They're not home." But a few minutes later, I saw a photo she posted of them in the backyard. The lie wasn't even subtle. It was casual, almost careless. The next time I visited, something in the children's behavior had changed too. They were polite and kind, but they kept glancing at their mother as if checking whether it was okay to talk to me. Their joy felt muted, their hugs hesitant. Children don't hide things well. Something had been said. Something had shifted. And then there was the moment that still breaks something inside me whenever I think of it. I called out to my youngest grandchild, and instead of running into my arms like she always did, she paused and whispered, "Mommy said not to bother you too much." Not to bother me. That was when I felt the first true sting of being erased. Not suddenly, not loudly, but slowly, in pieces. I wasn't losing them because they wanted distance. I was losing them because someone else was guiding them away from me. Visits became rare. Calls became shorter. The stories they used to share freely disappeared. And with each passing week, my name came out of their mouths less often, until I began to fear the day it might not come out at all. Have you ever watched a bond with a grandchild fade because of someone else's choices? I kept trying to stay connected, even as the distance between us grew wider. I sent simple messages, nothing demanding, nothing heavy. Just little check-ins the way any grandfather would do. How are the kids today? Did the school event go well? Tell them Grandpa says hello. Most of those messages sat there without a reply. The red receipts became little reminders of silence, glowing on my phone long after I had put it down. At first, I told myself she was busy, overwhelmed, too tired to answer. But when silence becomes a pattern, you stop being able to explain it away. When she did respond, the replies were clipped, colder than I ever remembered her being with me. "They're fine. We're busy. Later." No details, no warmth, no invitation to ask more. It felt like talking through a locked door. Then came the moments when I realized she was withholding things on purpose. I found out about a school performance only after another parent posted pictures online. My grandson stood on stage in a little paper crown, smiling so wide his eyes squinted. I should have been there. I had always been there for those moments. But she didn't tell me. She didn't even mention it afterward. Birthdays became another reminder. She used to let me bring a cake or take them out for lunch. Now I learned dates and times only through social media or by accident. She never said I couldn't come, but she made sure I didn't know when or where to go. The lies started small. "Kids are at practice," she'd text, even though the field was empty when I drove by. "We're out of town," she said another time, but their car was in the driveway and the curtains moved when I knocked. None of it was dramatic, none of it violent. But the cuts were deeper because they were silent. Quiet wounds you can't hide from. I began to notice she contacted me only when she wanted something. Money for school supplies, help fixing something around the house, a quick favor she didn't want to ask anyone else. And I always helped because that's what parents do, even when it hurts. But every time I reached out afterward, hoping to keep the conversation going, she disappeared again. It became painfully clear the communication was controlled. Not by schedules, not by stress, but by choice. And there were signs she was shaping the kids' understanding of me without saying it directly. When I asked one of them on the phone if they wanted to visit, I heard her voice in the background, sharp, telling them to keep the call short. The child's tone changed instantly, nervous, unsure, like they weren't supposed to enjoy talking to me. These weren't accidents. These weren't misunderstandings. These were steps, a quiet process of pushing me out of their world. I started to feel something I never imagined feeling with my own daughter. The sense that she was hiding me from her children, as if I were a problem to avoid instead of a person who loved them more than anything. At what point does silence become cruelty? I went to her house that afternoon with nothing more than 2 small gifts. Little puzzles the kids loved, and a book I used to read to them when they were younger. I told myself I wasn't going to cause trouble. I just wanted to see their faces, even for a minute. I thought maybe showing up with something simple and familiar would remind her that I wasn't trying to interfere, just trying to be present. When I walked up the driveway, her car was parked exactly where it always was. The curtains in the living room were slightly open. I could see shadows moving inside. A cartoon was playing. I could hear the faint sound of it drifting through the door. It was the show the kids watched every afternoon. There was no question. They were home. I knocked softly. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. But I heard footsteps. I heard whispering. And then I heard a voice that didn't belong to my daughter, low, irritated, telling someone to leave it and don't answer. That was the moment something broke inside me. I called her name, not loud, just enough for her to hear. It's me. I brought something for the kids. More whispering. Then silence. A careful, forced silence that pressed itself against the door. I stepped back and looked through the window again. The cartoon kept playing. A small head moved across the screen for a second, then disappeared. My grandchildren were right there. But I was being treated like a stranger, like someone who shouldn't be seen or heard. A couple walked by on the sidewalk. They recognized me. They'd seen me playing with the kids in the yard before. The woman glanced at the gifts in my hands, then at the door still closed in front of me. Her expression softened with pity she didn't try to hide. The man looked away quickly, as if witnessing something too private, too painful. Humiliation rises differently when you're an older man. It doesn't explode. It settles. It sinks into your bones and makes every breath feel heavier. I stood there a few more seconds, hoping for a sound, a call, anything. But the door stayed still. The laughter from the cartoon never paused. And the person inside, the one whose voice I didn't recognize, had decided I didn't belong there. I walked back to my car slowly, each step feeling like I was carrying something heavier than those small gifts. When I sat down, I placed the presents on the passenger seat and stared at them. They looked so out of place, bright, cheerful, full of love, while everything inside me felt dark and hollow. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about schedules or stress or children being tired. This was intentional. Someone was pushing her. Someone was shaping her choices. And I was being shut out on purpose. As I drove away, the same question kept echoing through my mind, sharp and painful. Would you walk away? Or keep trying? After that visit, I couldn't sit with the silence anymore. I knew something was wrong, and pretending everything was fine felt like letting the distance grow even deeper. So I called her. slowly, carefully, hoping we could talk without walls between us. Her voice was tense the moment she answered. "What do you want, Dad?" "I just want to understand," I said softly. "You didn't answer the door the other day. I thought maybe you didn't hear me." She hesitated. We weren't home. But I had heard the cartoon. I had seen movement. I had heard the unfamiliar voice telling her to leave it alone. Before I could respond, I heard that same voice again in the background. Short, sharp, telling her something I couldn't make out. When she came back on the line, her tone had changed, like she had swapped hers for someone else's. "We were out running errands. You must have been mistaken." It didn't fit. It wasn't even close to fitting. And once I started listening closely, I noticed every part of her story had cracks in it. When I asked casually how the kids were doing in school, she said, "They're doing fine." But earlier she had told me one of them was struggling with math. When I mentioned the school event I'd missed, she insisted there hadn't been one, even though I had seen the pictures myself. The contradictions piled up so fast that keeping track of them felt like trying to hold sand in my hands. I tried to stay gentle. "You've been different lately. Is everything all right at home?" Her breathing shifted, tight, irritated. "You're imagining things. Everything is fine." Another voice whispered something behind her. She lowered the phone but didn't mute it properly, and I caught a few words. "Say less and don't explain." Those two phrases cut deeper than anything else. Then I noticed something else. Small, but impossible to ignore. She mentioned the kids needed new clothes, said money had been tight. Yet earlier that week she posted photos from a new restaurant, her nails freshly done, wearing jewelry I'd never seen before. It wasn't about being fancy. She had every right to spend her money. But the mismatch between her words and her life made my stomach twist. When I asked if she needed help, she snapped, "Stop asking questions. You always make things harder." It reminded me of how she used to sound when she was coached for presentations, practiced, rehearsed, like the words weren't fully hers. The more she spoke, the more I realized I wasn't hearing my daughter. I was hearing someone speaking through her. By the time we ended the call, one truth had settled heavy in my chest. This wasn't just distance. This was control. Someone was guiding her responses, shaping her stories, deciding who she allowed into her life. And for the first time, I knew I couldn't look away from whatever this was. I had to look deeper. Because lies only grow when no one pays attention. When did someone's lie finally make you look closer? The call came on a Thursday morning, right as I was making breakfast. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me told me to answer anyway. When I picked up, a calm, professional voice introduced herself as the assistant principal from my grandchildren's school. "Mr. Davis, you're listed as the emergency contact for both children. We've been trying to reach their mother, and we haven't been able to get through." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had assumed she'd removed me from every part of their lives. She made it clear she didn't want me involved. But the school system still had my name. That tiny detail hit me harder than I expected. The woman continued, "We just wanted to verify a few things and check if you were aware of any changes at home. The children have been absent more than usual, and their mother hasn't returned our calls." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "She hasn't told me anything." Her tone softened. "Would you mind coming in to talk? We just want to make sure the kids are safe and that all authorized adults are reachable." When I arrived, the school counselor and assistant principal met me in a small office. They were polite, careful with their words, but the concern in their eyes was unmistakable. "We've noticed the children seem withdrawn," the counselor said, "and we haven't been able to contact your daughter for several days. We didn't know if something might be going on at home." I explained as honestly as I could how my daughter had been avoiding me, how she shut me out, how someone else seemed to influence her decisions. I didn't dramatize anything. I just told them the truth. They exchanged a look, the kind professionals share when puzzle pieces finally start fitting together. "That helps us understand," the counselor said. "We've had difficulty getting consistent information from her, and the children sometimes mention things that don't add up. They've spoken about rules, about who they're allowed to talk to." The word rules sent a chill through me. Rules about who they could talk to? Rules about me? Then the assistant principal asked a question that made the room feel smaller. "Has your daughter ever mentioned concerns about someone else influencing her parenting decisions?" I nodded slowly. "I've suspected it. A partner. Someone who doesn't want me around." They took notes carefully, not dramatic, not rushed, but with the seriousness of people who recognized warning signs. "This isn't just about missed calls anymore," the counselor said gently. "This could fall under welfare concerns. We may need to document this and possibly involve child services if we can't reach her soon." Hearing professionals talk about documenting welfare concerns made everything feel painfully real. This wasn't just emotional distance. This wasn't just a strained relationship. This was neglect. This was control. This was something dangerous growing behind closed doors. As I left the school, the weight on my chest felt different. Not just fear, but a painful validation. I wasn't imagining the changes. I wasn't overreacting. Something was wrong, and now other people saw it too. Should schools step in sooner when kids are being isolated from grandparents? I never imagined I'd sit in a courtroom because of my own daughter. Yet there I was, hands folded tightly, feeling older than I ever had, waiting for the truth I'd carried alone for so long to finally be spoken aloud. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Once the school documented their concerns, child services began asking questions. Neighbors stepped forward. Staff from the clinic shared missed appointments and unanswered calls. Piece by piece, a pattern formed, and it all pointed back to the same source: the man she let into her home and into her decisions. In court, the caseworker laid out the findings. Her partner had been controlling nearly every part of the household. He screened her messages. He handled her emails. He blocked numbers, including mine, using settings she later claimed she didn't understand. He even instructed the children on who they were allowed to acknowledge and who they weren't. Hearing that broke something in me. My grandchildren weren't pulling away from me. They were being trained to. Then came the financial evidence. A small loan application with my name used as a reference without my consent. A request for access to an old account I'd forgotten about. Nothing massive, but enough to show intent. Enough to prove he was willing to use my identity to leverage his own control. My daughter sat at the opposite table, arms crossed, jaw tight. There wasn't a trace of remorse in her face. When asked about the alienation, she said I was too involved, that she was protecting her kids from interference. She framed my concern as meddling. She tried to twist my worry into a flaw. Then the judge leaned forward, voice firm, steady, and unmistakably disappointed. Your father was your children's emergency contact because you never removed him. Your father was the one the school reached because you chose not to answer. And your father is the only consistent adult these children have had trying to look out for them. What you call interference, the court calls neglectful isolation. Silence filled the room. Even her partner looked down for the first time. The judge continued. This behavior shows a deliberate attempt to cut your children off from a stable relative while allowing a controlling adult to dictate your choices. The court cannot ignore that. Hearing those words didn't bring joy. It brought a painful mix of vindication and grief. Relief that someone finally recognized what was happening, and sorrow that it had come to this. In the end, temporary custody adjustments were ordered. Her partner was banned from unsupervised contact with the children. Formal charges were filed against him for identity misuse. And my daughter, she walked out of the courtroom without looking at me once. I got the truth I had been waiting for, but not the healing I once hoped for. Justice has a heavy price when the person on the other side is your own child. Do you think the consequences were enough? I used to think family was something you held on to no matter what. But standing at the end of this long, painful road, I finally understand that holding on can sometimes break you more than letting go. After the court's decision, I made a choice I never imagined I would make. I stepped back completely. Not out of anger, but out of the quiet knowledge that I couldn't survive another year of being someone's target for blame. Cutting those emotional ties felt like tearing out a part of my own history. I raised my daughter with a steady hand and a full heart. I taught her patience, kindness, and how to stand up for herself. Somewhere along the way, she learned to stand against me instead. Betrayal does something to a person. It reshapes the way you carry your memories. They don't disappear, but they sit deeper, quieter, like old scars that ache in the cold. I accept now that I lost her long before the courtroom said it out loud. Losing her hurt less than holding on to the version of her that kept wounding me. And accepting that truth gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I started building a new life, one piece at a time. I joined a morning walking group at the park. I planted tomatoes in the backyard again. I learned the names of the people at the local community center instead of sitting in silence, waiting for a message that never came. Small routines became anchors, steady, simple, honest. In those quiet moments, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten. People ask if I miss my grandchildren. Of course I do. I miss the way their hands wrapped around mine. I miss their questions, their laughter, their trust. But I also know something their mother can't hide forever. Children grow up. They ask questions. They look for the people who love them without condition. One day they will wonder why I disappeared. And when that day comes, the truth will be there, waiting for them. Steady, patient, and unhidden. The story of who I was to them cannot be erased by someone else's fear or control. It will live in the photos they'll find, in the school records with my name, in the memories that rise without warning. She can keep them from my arms, but she can't keep them from the truth. This year, on Father's Day, I woke up to a quiet house. No calls, no knock on the door. I brewed a cup of coffee, stepped outside and watched the sun rise without waiting for anything or anyone. For the first time, the day didn't hurt. It simply existed. And so did I. My legacy won't be measured by who stayed, but by the dignity I chose when I walked away. What do elders truly deserve at the end of their lives?